Hi and welcome to Life Plus. My name is Luke Taylor and I'm the minister of New Life Church Teesside, and it's wonderful to be with you to share this time together. We've called these times Life Plus because that's exactly what they're all about: exploring the meaning of life, the place God has in our lives, who we are as people, and what God has done for us. But also Jesus promised those who follow him would have life abundantly, life eternally, life plus. I hope tonight will encourage you, I hope it will challenge you and help you see more clearly who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. If you have any questions or things that you'd like to discuss, if you're watching this with a home host tonight, I know they were absolutely delighted to help you with that. If you're watching this alone, please feel free to get in touch with us. Today we're once again joined by Agust Olafsson, who is bringing a message of hope to for those moments in life where you just feel stuck. But first, let's start with some music.
Some say he was an outlaw, that he'd roam across the land with a bunch of unschooled ruffians and a few old fishermen. No one knew just where he came from or exactly what he'd done, but they said it must have been something bad to keep him on the run. Some say he was a poet, that he'd stand upon the hill, that his voice could calm an angry crowd or make the waves stand still, that he spoke in many parables that few could understand. But the people sat for hours just to listen to this man. Some say he was a sorcerer, a man of mystery. He could walk upon the water, he could make the blind man see, that he conjured wine at weddings and did tricks with fish and bread, that he spoke of being born again, raise people from the dead. Some say a politician who spoke of being free. He was followed by the masses on the shores of Galilee. He spoke out against corruption and he bowed to no decree, but they feared his strength and power, so they nailed him to a tree. Some say he was the Son of God, a man above all men, but he came to be a servant and to set us free from sin. And that's who I believe he is, 'cause that's who I believe. And I think we should get ready, for it's almost time to leave.
Back in 2019, we had a very difficult time in my family. One of our child one of our children was going through a really rough time. It's probably one of the most difficult moments of my life. And as I was thinking about that afterwards, I thought, what do you do when you're really stuck? What do you do when you don't see a way forward and you feel that you're just locked in? That's how I felt at that time. I don't know if you ever felt that way, that you are unable to move forward, or you're dealing with a problem and you're unable to resolve it on your own resources or by yourself. You're stuck. That's how I felt at that time. And I want to share with you a story about that and ways to move forward when you're in a situation like that. It comes from the Gospel of Mark, which is one of the books in the New Testament, and it's in the chapter 10. I just want to read that for you, and then we'll go from there. This story centers around a city called Jericho, and you can actually go there and see the ruins of Jericho even today. So it's a real place. And Jesus was on his way, really on his last journey towards Jerusalem, where he was going to be nailed to a cross. This was his last journey. It starts here in verse 46. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him. But he shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," which means teacher, the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." Instantly, the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. So what I find really interesting in this story is that we actually see Bartimaeus stuck. Being blind in Israel in the year 33 or so was a very difficult thing to be. Maybe he had something to eat, but it was completely dependent on what people would give him. There was no social security system, nothing. Maybe he had hit his spot where he sat, but it says here that he was actually kind of outside the city. And it's very likely that he was not only outside of the city physically, but actually also an outsider. He was not in the club. He was not among those that was respected in the city. He was an outcast. And here he is sitting. It's very interesting to see that he seems to go through a process of decisions. Let me just give you a few examples. First of all, he has been sitting there for a long time, it seems. And Jesus, he hears about Jesus. He hears about this guy who is walking around and traveling in Israel and healing people. And right at that moment, Bartimaeus had his first decision. Who is this Jesus? Do I believe what people are telling me about him? Do I believe that Jesus actually can meet people and heal people? And it seems that he started to believe that because he starts to listen. He starts to pay attention to what is going on around him. Now, don't forget that he was blind, so he couldn't look or use his eyes to look for Jesus. But, and here's a very important part, he used what he had, right? He had ears, he could hear, and he started to use his hearing to listen. And then there comes a moment, it says here in the text, when Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout. So either somebody told him, hey, Jesus is walking through town, or somehow he heard that Jesus was passing by. And then he makes another decision. He had a mouth, he had a voice, right? He couldn't see, but he had a voice. So he uses another thing that he had, and he starts to shout, Jesus, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I need you. He's calling out. And here comes the most interesting thing, because the people around him try to shut him down. Be quiet. You know, here's the famous Jesus walking through our town. We do not want you, the beggar, to be the last thing that this magnificent man sees. Be quiet. Don't be shouting. And here, Bartimaeus has a very, very important decision to make. Who controls this voice? Who controls this body? Who controls my life? Am I going to stay silent because the people tell me to? Or am I going to use what I have to call for help and to call on Jesus? I don't know what situation you are dealing with or have dealt with, but you probably experienced where other people want to control you in some way. You know, maybe someone at work is in an unhealthy way wanting to control you. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your mother-in-law. If you're married, you may have experienced this. And then you need to decide who really controls this life. Obviously, I'm not encouraging you to use that power in a bad way, but there's a healthy way to take responsibility for our life and make good decisions, even if other people are telling you otherwise. That's what I'm saying. So even if the people are telling him to be quiet, he decides to shout louder, right? He goes the opposite direction. And Jesus responds to him and says, tell him to come here. And here, Bartimaeus really has another decision, because there's a large crowd there, lots of people, and he needs to make a decision to stand up, knowing that everyone is watching him, and walk towards Jesus. He could have said, actually, I'm not okay with it. I'm just going to sit here. You know, I am not going to walk towards Jesus. I want Jesus to come to me, or something like that. But it says, Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. Have you ever seen a blind person jump up? I would think a blind person would stand up gently so you wouldn't hit your head or something. But Bartimaeus, he jumps up. He throws aside his coat that maybe was the only thing he owned. It's like he's leaving his old life and he's walking to Jesus. That was another decision. But we're not done, because here comes something that I think is one of the most interesting questions in the whole of the Bible, really. Because Jesus asks him, what do you want me to do for you? And remember, everybody knew that Bartimaeus was blind. Jesus certainly knew that Bartimaeus was blind. It's obvious from the context that Bartimaeus wanted to see again. Still, Jesus is asking him this question. Why? I think it's because Jesus is telling him, I see you. I see you, and I am not going to assume upon you. I want to lift up and give you a voice. Jesus is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the greatest person that has ever walked this earth. And Jesus asks him, what do you want me to do for you? And then Jesus waits. He waits for Bartimaeus to use his voice and again determine what he wants for his life. And what do you want for your life? Are you using what you have? Your voice, your eyes, your ears, how you move and use your body, are you using that to pursue good things that you want for your life in a healthy way? Bartimaeus, could have asked for, I want a big house and lots of money and a new Mercedes. What are you going to ask? What are you going to ask in a healthy way that actually is good? And are you going to persist in that? That's a whole big story here. So Bartimaeus says, I want to see, but we're not done, because Jesus says, go, for your faith has healed you. Jesus says, go, but in the very next sentence it says, instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. It's very interesting. Jesus says, go, but Bartimaeus decides to follow Jesus, to go and walk with Jesus. And that is another decision that you can make. You can decide to follow Jesus. And I just want to highlight how at different levels Bartimaeus had options. He could choose A or B. He could decide to just stay silent when the people told him to be silent, or he could decide not to follow Jesus or to follow Jesus. You have choices. If you breathe, you have hope and you have choices. You can use your life to follow Jesus. And how does that work? Well, it starts by simply turning to him and saying, Jesus, I want to follow you. Will you help me? That's what Bartimaeus said. He said, Jesus, help me. And you can start the same way.
Thank you, Agust. Yes, you have a choice. You can choose to ask Jesus to change your life, or you can let the moment go. Can I encourage you not to let this moment pass you by? You can make that decision to ask Jesus to forgive you and to restore you. Can we just for a moment pray? If you're in that place where you want to say, Jesus, I need your help, I'd love to pray with you. For those who are watching, Lord, I just pray that, Lord, they'll have that courage to reach out to you, to stand up and say, Jesus, I need your help. I can't change my life without you. Pray for those who are watching, that, Lord, they'll be able to ask you with a simple prayer to forgive them of their sin, to become their Lord, and, Lord, to help them lead a new life. I pray those who are stuck will be set free. Amen. Amen. Well, if you've prayed that prayer or you'd like to pray, speak to your home host if you're watching with somebody. If you're watching alone, please feel free to get in touch and we'd love to pray with you. God bless you. We'll see you again next time.